Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of the Hare Krishnas in Britain podcast. This is episode number 22 for the last 22 weeks, which is, 5 months. We've been virtually traveling around the UK to chat to devotees, meet devotees around Great Britain and Northern Ireland as well, I guess, to find out what they're up to around the UK. And what's been fascinating is to meet virtually at least a huge array of devotees from around the country. And I've always been keen to ensure that the Hare Krishnas in Britain podcast is open, is inclusive, and it invites people from different mats and different sanghas from around the UK. And on that note, I'm hugely pleased and delighted to welcome our special guest this week, Radhika, devi, dasi. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Bol, everyone.
Thank you for joining us. All glories to Srila Prabupada, absolutely. Thank you for joining us. I think you and I, we were chatting before this, and you said you couldn't remember, but I think we first met probably 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 5 years ago at Bhaktivedanta Manor, and yourself and your family would often be there doing kirtan, I think on a Saturday night, maybe Saturday night kirtan, I can't quite remember. And I often see you all on Harinams, etc., etc. And as things happen in this miserable material existence, or however you would see it, I then didn't see you for a few years. You kind of just disappeared.
Yeah. Like every Saturday, and then that was it. Yeah. No more.
Completely disappeared. Yeah. And you are one of the founding members of an organization called Hare Krsna London.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about, start by telling us a bit about you, where you're from, and then tell us a bit about Hare Krsna London. What's it all about?
Okay, so as you mentioned, we met maybe 5 years ago. So I've been into the movement much before that. Reading Prabhupada's books. We were sort of raised with Prabhupada's books actually, but kind of, the material world takes over and you kind of get into the working world and all that stuff. So anyway, you lose track. And then slowly we all started going to the temple together, and that was the Manor and Soho, and familiarize ourselves with the teachings and the practice, and getting really into service. So we were doing a lot of book distribution, we were joining sanghas, classes, everything, and then, as you said, we literally stopped going, and that is the topic that we're going to discuss, of course, afterwards. But that was what caused us to completely stop going. It was something that we couldn't resolve, and the result was that, and it didn't stop us continuing our service. And we learned that actually without the connection to the Guru, it was all kind of pointless. So we set up the little sangha that we had, and then called it Hare Krsna London, and carried on the Sankirtan, carried on trying to invite people to discuss, because we enjoyed doing the Bhakti Vriksha sangha, the classes, and that was it. It kind of snowballed from there, and here we are. We carried on everything.
So I think I had a look at your Facebook page earlier today. I think Hare Krsna London was set up in 2017.
17 was when the social media came on board, but we were doing that. I think a year before we were.
Okay. So this is your 5th birthday, your 5th anniversary of.
Yes, so.
And just to say, I think it's a very original, great name, actually, Hare Krsna London. I think in the one sense you were very lucky because it wasn't taken before.
No, we were so lucky.
Bizarrely, that no one had that name.
Yeah, well, if you've noticed, and I think you probably have, is the spelling is not with the I and H. So we've managed to, get in there with that one.
So so in terms of Hare Krsna London, you've kind of, how shall I say it? You've kind of, I'll say, set yourself apart. That sounds a bit ominous, but you've kind of made a name for yourselves and you're a small sangha, but a very busy sangha, a sangha that's devoted to service. And obviously, we're going to talk about something today called the Ripvic order.
Yes, exactly.
And anyone listening or watching on YouTube or Facebook, this is the key reason I've invited Radhika on today. And so Hare Krsna London is a mat, a sangha that follows something called the Ripvic order. And actually, as well as, even though this is episode 22, this is the first ever, I think this is the first ever episode where we've had somebody that follows the Ripvic order on the show. So it makes it extra. Radhika, we're gonna talk a bit about this and we'll kind of delve into it. Tell us, for any of our listeners or viewers at home who may have never heard of the Ripvic order, tell us, what is it?
What is it? So it is an order that is given by Srila Prabhupada before his disappearance of how the movement should continue once he had disappeared. Because obviously Prabhupada knows when he's going to be disappearing, so he has to make plans as to what will happen with his giant organization and his disciples and his future disciples. So we came across all the information, the conversations, and of course the famous, I'm going to try and find it in here, July 9th letter, which describes what should happen when Prabhupada leaves.
So just for context, this is a letter that Srila Prabhupada wrote on the 9th of July, 1977. It was one of his kind of final letters, I mean, eventually, because he left his body in November 1977.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I hadn't thought this far ahead, but you could read the letter out if you want to, if you want to. I can't remember how long the letter is now.
Yeah. It's actually very short.
Okay, go ahead. Or read parts of it or whatever you feel comfortable with, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, dear Maharajas and Prabhus, please accept my humble obeisances at your feet. Recently, when all of the DVC members were with His Divine Grace in Vrindavan, Srila Prabhupada indicated that soon he would appoint some of his senior disciples to act as Ritvic representatives of the Acharya, for the purpose of performing initiations, first both initiation and second initiation. His Divine Grace has so far given a list of 11 disciples who will act in that capacity. So far has given. Okay. And he names 11 of his disciples. In the past, temple presidents have written to Srila Prabhupada recommending a particular devotee's initiation. Now that Srila Prabhupada has named these representatives, temple presidents may henceforth send recommendation for first and second initiation to whichever of these 11 representatives are nearest their temple. After considering the recommendation, these representatives may accept the devotee as an initiated disciple of Srila Prabhupada by giving a spiritual name, or in the case of second initiation, by chanting on the Gayatri thread, just as Srila Prabhupada has done. The newly initiated devotees are disciples of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and the above 11 senior devotees acting as his representative. And then after the temple president receives a letter from the representatives giving them spiritual name or the thread, he can perform the fire yajna in the temple as was being done before. The name of the newly initiated disciple should be sent by the representative who has accepted him or her to Srila Prabhupada to be included in His Divine Grace initiated disciples book. It's signed by Prabhupada and it was written by Tamal Krishna Goswami. So it was typed up by a Prabhupada disciple and signed by both of them. So Prabhupada was fully aware of what was written in that and had approved of it. So I think it's all very, very, very clear in that letter that at no point did Prabhupada want that system to stop.
So just to kind of recap, the Ripvic order is an order, and you might want to correct me when I say things, it's an order that Srila Prabhupada wrote a letter on the 9th of July, dated the 9th of July, 1977, where he's recommending or giving instructions that these 11 disciples of his are his representatives and they can initiate on his behalf.
Exactly.
So if they're to initiate, the disciples further on down the line are disciples of Prabhupada, and those 11 are doing it on Prabhupada's behalf. Yeah. And in a nutshell, a devotee who is a follower of the Ripvic order would generally be of the view that that set of instructions is kind of infinitum. It's forever. Is that correct or not?
Well, there are maybe other people who have interpreted as such, but as far as our understanding is, this isn't the be all and end all. If a pure devotee becomes apparent and Krishna has, appointed that person as the representative of the whole Krishna consciousness movement to propagate it, another Prabhupada, then, or even not another Prabhupada, but a successor of Prabhupada, then we would all be aware, fully aware. Krishna would not let us squander that opportunity and not make that clear to us. So we're not saying that it's this and that's it.
Okay.
No, we're saying if someone becomes apparent, it's going to be known to us and we will take that person as our Diksha Guru. But right now, there isn't anyone. So we have a backup plan. We have the plan here, it's clear for us in black and white that we don't need to worry. Prabhupada is still going to be our Guru until whenever that next person comes, and whoever it may be.
Okay, so I'm just gonna so kind of to broaden it a bit, and so some of our listeners or viewers might understand is that generally my limited neophyte understanding of Gaudiya Vaishnavism over the last 500 years is generally the trend is there's a guru, there's a disciple, there's a guru, there's a disciple, and the transmission of the message generally goes on from generation to generation. I mean, when I say generation, it's usually spiritual, but also it's meant biological. It has been, but generally disciple to disciple to disciple. So the situation in ISKCON now, and most other Gaudiya Vaishnava groups, is that you have a guru, you have a disciple. In fact, that guru will have lots of disciples, and there's a chance that maybe at least one of those disciples will become a guru, and then they'll have disciples, and it's kind of, it goes on and on and on. But what, just so I want our listeners and our viewers to understand, what the followers of the Ritvic order and Hare Krsna London are saying is that actually it stops, or it has stopped for the time being.
Exactly.
With Srila Prabhupada.
There's no stop.
Okay.
It always continues. But what it means is that physical appearance, the physical presence, there's so much talk about Vani and Vapu. So the Vapu, the physical presence of that spiritual master, is not present right now. It's disappeared, which we understand Prabhupada is not in our physical view. But that does not mean that the continuation of what the parampara is, which is what you're describing, the guru disciples, it hasn't stopped. At no point has it stopped. We're still fully fledged continuing the movement. And Prabhupada, even, can I add in there that Bhaktisiddhanta, before he left, he had said, I don't want to pick a successor. I want my disciples to take the role. And then out of that GBC or whatever organization, a self-effulgent person or acharya will be manifest. And I think, this is what we're still waiting for. the Ritvics, or at least, not waiting for, but trying to fulfill that. It's a case of carrying on the movement as best we possibly can, and not having to concern ourselves with, who is this guru that we're waiting for, because Prabhupada's still here. He's still initiating. He's still he left us his books. He's left us his instructions, letters, conversations, his kirtan. We're missing nothing from what they had in the 70s to now. Could be the same time zone.
So generally, sorry if the questions sound a bit kind of layman's questions, but I just want people to kind of fully understand what the kind of followers of the Ritvic order would propose or say. Is so in terms of, let's use ISKCON as an example, because Srila Prabhupada's the founder Acharya of ISKCON. I mean, there's other mats as well, but ISKCON as an example. Would a follower of the Ritvic order, would a member of Hare Krsna London, therefore not accept any of the current gurus in ISKCON as legitimate? or bona fide?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In short, yeah.
I like people who give blunt answers. Okay. So
don't get me wrong here. We're not faulting the concept of parampara, but the person fulfilling the role of a diksha guru is not like some airy fairy thing that we can go, yeah, anyone can be diksha guru, anyone can be like this. We just have to prance around or whatever. That's not. We're being clear here that this is a very difficult role to fulfill, and being an Uttamadhikari is a very prized. It's a rare thing. So
I wondered if in a minute we're going to talk a bit about what I think is the history of the Ripvic movement, and but I'm keen so people can fully understand. I mean, anyone can Google Ripvic order letter. I mean, it's all over the internet. I would say probably, I can't remember if I said this earlier, out of all of Prabhupada's letters, and he wrote a lot, it's probably the one that's most widely talked about, most widely read, most widely everything, in its broadest sense. I wondered if widely discussed. That's it. I mean, we're doing a special episode now on that one letter, basically, and Hare Krsna London.
Lecture are we from the 70s that we're still having to?
Yeah. It's talk more about than the Magna Carta. So just, I mean, again, people can Google the letter, but Prabhupada gave 11 names, didn't he?
He did.
In that letter. Do you want to tell us who those 11 names were or are?
Yeah, I can read them out for
you. That'll be good, because I want to then come in with another question.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm ready. So His Holiness Kirtanananda Swami, His Holiness Satsvarup Das Goswami, H.H. Jayapataka Swami, H.H. Tamal Krishna Goswami, H.H. Hridayananda Goswami, H.H. Bhavananda Goswami, H.H. Hamsadutta Swami, H.H. Rameshwara Swami, H.H. Harikesh Swami, and His Grace Bhagavan Das Adhikar, and His Grace Jayatirtha Das Adhikar.
So any ISKCON historians out there, or ISKCON files, I'm not sure, ISKCONites out there might have recognized that of those 11 names, 3 of them are still in ISKCON, and they're still in the original positions, if you like, that Prabhupada put them in. So those 3, in case anyone's wondering, are His Holiness Jayapataka Swami, Satsvarup Goswami, and Hridayananda Goswami. The other 8 are not either not in ISKCON, or they've passed away, or they're in ISKCON, but they've no longer in the sannyas ashram. I think a number of them left and came back. So my question, I guess, is in relation, so in terms of the letter saying these 11 are my representatives, and for the time being, they are the ones that initiate on my behalf. Does that mean that a follower of the Ripvic order, or particularly Hare Krsna London, would recognize that only those 3 left in good standing can initiate?
So do they follow this order, first of all? Because if they're not following this order, then no. They're, as far as I understand, what they're saying now is, now Prabhupada has passed, or he's disappeared, we are now fully fledged Diksha Guru, which means I initiate you as my disciple. You're no longer, as Prabhupada said, my disciple. Okay. So for us, this 11 is all defunct, essentially.
I mean, that was my kind of one of my devil's advocate questions. Is it just those 3? But you've answered my questions by, if those 3 accept disciples for themselves, then no, they're not following the Ripvic order interpretation of the 1970 July 9th letter. I'm trying to be a good news reader here.
I was going to say that, obviously we wouldn't use the word interpretation there. Just to clarify.
Okay, so I feel like I'm kind of treading baby steps here, because I know I feel like this is going to be quite the the dragged out interview, because
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of people watching this that will be asking lots of questions. They'll be wondering why I've invited you on the podcast to talk to you. My personal view is that we're living in Great Britain. Well, that's not a personal view, that's a fact. It's a modern Western liberal democracy, and you can talk to anyone you want to, and we have to be adult about certain things. The Ritvik, generally, so people can in ISKCON can understand, generally if a devotee is a follower of the Ritvik order, they will not recognize any of the current gurus in ISKCON, and there's a view that for the time being, the Sampradaya has paused with Srila Prabupada. I think that's...
Yeah, although we wouldn't say it's paused. For us, it's always continuing. The spiritual aspect of Prabhupada is in his Vani, and that Vani is continuing, and we can access it through those medias like I've discussed, the internet or books or other Ritvik devotees, you know. So for us, it's not paused, it's still continuing.
Okay, so my kind of limited neophyte understanding of the history of ISKCON is I'm just putting some context here for people listening and watching. The Ritvik, so what Radhika's involved with, has had historically quite a bit of popularity.
Yes.
Particularly in the 80s, if you look at all the gurus that were falling and people that were leaving ISKCON to go to other mats. I would also say probably the first half of the 90s, is that people were very seriously looking at the kind of the Ritvik order and how, you know, how that letter is to be, words to use, taken forward. And my personal view, obviously I'm not naming any names here, but I would say there's a number of people in ISKCON that would be like Radhika, would follow the Ritvik order in that sense. And for whatever reason, it's not talked about publicly. And those people that I can think of are, in the way that people in ISKCON will understand it, they're Srila Prabhupada disciples. So they're older than me and Radhika. They're men or women over 65. The reason, I'm nowhere near that age yet. So the reason why I don't know why you're laughing. The reason I said something then was...
You have to make it obvious. You have to state it, which you don't need to.
So the reason why I mentioned something about Diksha there, because I was going to go on to another question, because in terms of the ISKCON, and I am going to talk about other mats in a minute, by the way, it's not just about ISKCON, but in ISKCON's official position, it's a view of thousands of millions of devotees, is that Srila Prabhupada is the founder acharya of ISKCON, and he is the Shiksha guru for everyone in ISKCON. That's generally what's taught, that's the party line. However, Radhika, so I feel like I'm talking for her now, Radhika, who in what way would you describe yourself as a disciple of Prabhupada? In what way?
In every way. Every way. That anyone else who was in his physical presence was a disciple of Prabhupada. You know, so many people barely saw Prabhupada, let alone were in his service, you know. And where does this come from, that we have to be in physical presence of the Diksha Guru to be his disciple? You know, this is again another thing where I've never heard this. And when the acharya disappears, suddenly everything is now ended, and we have to have a successor. This is also, you know, not a spiritual thing. This is a bodily concept understanding. So I haven't heard anyone resolve that.
So I feel like you would use the label or the expression or the term Diksha disciple. You would refer, I mean, Prabhupada is your guru in many ways, but you would refer to him as your Diksha guru. Well, a lot of people listening to this would think, well, how can that be? She's certainly way under 30. And I was told never ask a woman or a swami their age, but she's certainly not of 65. Well, she's certainly not. Radhika's certainly not of the age where she was physically present in her current body in pre-77. I'm treading on water here.
That's perfectly correct.
You would describe yourself as a Diksha disciple of Prabhupada, and a lot of people will think, well, how can that be?
Yes,
listening
yes.
to this. So explain how is that? How does that work?
Yeah, this is the second issue of understanding the Ripvic philosophy. We have the order, so that's one thing. Then the second thing to clarify is, well, how is this Diksha being transmitted to the disciple when Prabhupada's physical presence isn't here? So that is between the spiritual aspect of the disciple and the guru. It is not to do with the bodily aspect. Now, Prabhupada's Bani is transcendental. It is not just an ordinary book. It's not an ordinary conversation. Those things are on the spiritual platform. So whenever we listen to Prabhupada, we're no longer connected on a material level. We're not listening to something that will die. It's something that is eternal. So how are we a Diksha disciple? Well, that Diksha is still present for us. Diksha actually is not the fire sacrifice. It's not a yagya. The Diksha means that which can destroy, that transcendental knowledge which can destroy the sins of the person. Sorry, I'm paraphrasing and I don't have the exact quote. Oh, there we go. Diksha is the process by which one can awaken his transcendental knowledge and vanquish all reactions caused by sinful activity. A person expert in the study of revealed scriptures knows this process as Diksha. So the Diksha is not, oh, I have to have a yagya and this physical presence must be there. We're actually talking about Prabhupada's Bani, and that's carrying the Diksha. So anyone who has that, vibration, the Shabda Brahman, that vibration that can transmit the pure message, Krishna, pure message, that person is giving the Diksha. And that is only Prabhupada at the moment. So
It's a bit about
fire sacrifice.
Sorry, I cut you off. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say the fire sacrifice is conducted on behalf of Prabhupada by a senior disciple. You mentioned those who were around in the 70s who were discussing this. They are considered our senior god brothers, and they are, who we'd turn to and say, okay, can you please conduct my Ripvic ceremony and initiate me as a Prabhupada disciple? And they would follow that letter, and everything in there would be absolutely checkboxed,
So tell us a bit about your own fire ceremony initiation. Tell us a bit about that, kind of when did it happen, how did it happen, and who performed the ceremony? Tell us a bit about that.
So we are a small set of emerging Ritvics who are following a similar, understanding. There are splintering groups that have different conclusive ideas, and some say that you shouldn't have a fire sacrifice. There's no need for initiation. There are some who are saying, yeah, we must continue this. This is also transcendental. So we found a gentleman or a Prabhu in Germany who is also following the same system we are, and his name is Dhananjay Prabhu, and he set up a small sangha in Germany, and he was initiated by a Prabhu in Malaysia who is a Prabhupada disciple, and his name is
Don't worry, I'm terrible with names as well, particularly Vaishnava names and Vaishnavi names. I'm just terrible, particularly long names.
So in any case, he was given the instruction of how to conduct the ceremony, came to London, and it's important to understand that he was conducting it on behalf of Prabhupada. So at no point were the mantras with his name in them. So the initiation mantras were all Prabhupada's name. So as far as we're concerned, Dhananjay Prabhu is just an instrument for Prabhupada.
One of the I'm kind of one of the things about, I've been kind of around the ISKCON community for almost 20 years, and you hear a lot of things and people say certain things, and often you kind of get the impression that talking about the Ritvic order or Ritvic philosophy or associating with Ritvics is a no-go area.
Oh, yeah.
It's like the worst thing that you can do. It's And you and I, we didn't have any contact for many years. And as people know who follow this podcast or follow this social media channel, I spent a few years researching for a book on the Hare Krishna movement in the UK, and I wanted to write a book about the movement in its entirety, if at all possible. And I did think, I'll be honest with you, I did think for a while, do I really want to include the Ritviks? Because I don't know. I had to think about who is the audience for the book and what do we understand by Hare Krishna movement and what is Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And after a few sleepless nights, no, I'm joking, no sleepless nights, after a bit of deliberation, I decided that it's important to include all groups, if at all possible, that are in the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu family. Going on off a bit of a tangent, one of the other initiatives or programs or sanghas mentioned in the book is run by someone who I've not had the best relationship with in the past, and one of the proofreaders of the book knew about that, and she said to me, why are you including him in the book? And I said, well, this book's not about me. It's not about what I think. It's about the Hare Krishna movement in Britain. Whether I personally agree or disagree with what I'm actually writing about, I've tried to be as objective as possible. And that's not always, psychologists say you can never be purely objective because we've got these preconceived ideas. And spiritually, as philosophers, we'd say, well, actually, some of these ideas are from previous lives. I've gone off on a bit of a tangent there.
Easily done.
And that's why for me it was really important to include talk about the Ripvic order, because it has been a part of the history and the current situation in the Hare Krishna movement in the UK. And Hare Krsna London is a part of the wider Hare Krishna community. I think you chant the same mantra as everyone else, right? I think
Of course we do. Yeah.
Of course you do. I think that you follow the same regulative principles as that we all try to follow. Hence the word try. Yes. You actually do. And also, you're living a sattvic life. You read the same. I assume the same books. Srila Prabhupada's books. And so ultimately the difference is there are some actually you and I had a conversation a year and a half ago, and I think I said something like, there's some small theological differences here. I can see you, okay? Can you see me? I think you went off a bit there. And then you said no, you actually said no. You okay?
Yeah, I can see you now.
So, and I said to you, there's a few small theological differences, but other than that, and you said no, actually they're quite big theological differences.
Yeah. We do, like, if anyone was looking at the Ritvics, compared to ISKCON, everything is exactly the same as you mentioned, but that's a big difference. What we've just been discussing for, I don't know, 45 minutes or something, and it's one that people are struggling to accept as, even like you've said, to even entertain the idea of reading into this Ripvic thing has been, taboo, or how dare you speak to those, like we're lepers or something. And everything you've just said, we're following everything. So how can you reject that so boldly and so harshly, like as if it's I don't know, like we're just some add-ons, or I can't really describe it. My words have left me.
You see, a lot of people, a lot of devotees would interpret the July the 9th, 1977 letter to be not infinitum, to be or for a period of time, and that period of time was from the 9th of July through to the 14th of November, when Srila Prabhupada physically left the planet. So that would be the interpretation that
Uh-huh.
a lot of devotees put on it, and then a lot of sastric references to parampara, sampradaya, guru disciple relationship would be added onto that to add weight to the argument that the letter was only applicable for 5-6 months.
Well, where is that evidence that that's correct? You know, why interpret something like that? You know, I read this letter as someone without any agenda. You know, before, well, I was in ISKCON, I had no position to be made. I was doing a good job, and I had, you know, I was happy in what I was doing before. I had no reason to come to ISKCON and say, well, I want to, you know, trample all over it and take it over and interpret something. So then I look at who is interpreting this, and I'm not saying that because they have a position they are doing that, but I, you know, looking at their arguments as to what henceforth means, or you know, what this word means and that word. Why I need to interpret it? I just look at the English dictionary and as a whole come to the conclusion of the letter, and I see that Prabhupada says from now on, please continue this, and if anything changes, then and someone is an acharya, a pure soul who's self-effulgent, they will become apparent and they will take on this movement and carry it forward. So, you know, Prabhupada does say that. He says, in the disappearance of an acharya, the sincere disciples take over and re-establish the movement. So this is going to happen.
So I had a number of things going through my head there, and I wasn't sure which one to kind of start with. I did speak to another devotee about a year ago who also follows the Ripvic order, and he said to me that ISKCON is actually following the Ripvic order, but in a kind of diluted way.
Okay, yeah.
So Prabhupada didn't appoint a successor in the way that other religious traditions do, but he appointed a governing body, and ultimately, and I've heard some of the gurus say this in the initiations, not all of them, but some of them are initiating on behalf of Prabhupada. I have heard one or two say that. So I've never attended one of them, but I heard one of the Radhika Swami initiations where Radhika Swami did say, I initiate you on behalf of Srila Prabupada.
Okay, now when Radhika Swami or any of the other gurus who are saying that they are initiating on behalf of, are they making it abundantly clear what that means? Are you a disciple, or is Prabhupada your Shiksha guru or your Diksha guru? Because people are like, well, Shiksha, Diksha, you know, we can mix these things up and you know, don't have to be so clear about it. So as far as I understand, everything that Radhanath Swami presents himself as is not a Ritvik. He is presenting himself and says himself to be the Diksha Guru, the successor, the you know, next the pure devotee disciple who can of Prabhupada to connect into the parampara. So, you know, I don't see that he is actually a Ritvik.
Since I started doing this podcast, released the book, and doing various things, one devotee, I think for me personally, I've always been keen to encourage people wherever they are in their lives. You know, I'm quite libertarian, which means I hate telling people what to do. People have to make their own decisions. And one devotee, obviously not going to name him, he is still, I believe, aspiring for initiation in ISKCON. And he contacted me a few months ago on social media. He said, hey, you know, can I ask you a question? These Ritvics, do they have a point? And I gave an answer. I gave my personal view, but then I said ultimately he has to make his own mind up for himself. He was feeling a bit despondent over certain things, and he said, "Hey, maybe these Ritvics have a point." So I actually did give him your contact details or the details for Hare Krsna London. I don't know if he got in touch, but I can share those with you after. But it's something that people ask. I mean, I'm of the view that people within the Hare Krishna movement, whichever mat they're in, need to just feel more confident about asking questions. and there should be a safer or more open environment to ask questions.
Yeah, I mean, we tried to do that. I have to say, when this all came to light for us, we went to the senior members that we were close with in the manor and tried to discuss them. And they were all kind of, okay, well, we can't really resolve what you're looking for. So we then set this up to say, well, if ISKCON are not providing that, we will. And come here, discuss this, whatever you like. Discuss how we understand this Ripvic order, and anything you want to ask about it, we have no qualms to answer them. So that's definitely something needed, definitely.
It's interesting how kind of the word or the concept of Ritvik is kind of pushed about in the Hare Krishna movement. Do you want to, in case because we've got kind of 53 minutes into it already, do you want to give it just a definition? Now, we can chat for another 53 minutes, I don't mind. Do you want to give us a definition of what Ritvik actually means? What does the word actually mean?
Yes, this is a good point. Oh my God, how have we not mentioned it?
We should have mentioned it. I'm sorry to all the listeners and viewers. What does the word Ritvik actually mean?
Yeah, my God. Okay, so Ritvik is actually a priest. That's all it means. It's I can give you the Bhagavatam reference is 4.7.16, and Ritvik is the priests. And they're basically, as in any other religious movement, someone who will conduct any religious ceremony. The yajna is a religious ceremony. It's not paramount to the connection between the spiritual master and the disciple, although it formalizes it. And this is why we need the priests. The priest is also someone who is senior, that the disciple, the younger disciples can go to and say, well, I'm in trouble. What do I do? Or can you please encourage some training? Or can you please, I don't know, slap me when I don't follow this, or whatever it is, and that's it.
And it's somewhat, I guess it can mean kind of acting as a representative, or a representative or substitute. And in the context that we're using it, it's a representative of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada in this conversation. Yeah. So a follower of the Ripvic order will recognize that these people or devotees who are acting as priests are substitutes or representatives of Srila Prabhupada. And in certainly within ISKCON, the position is we're not following the Ritvic philosophy, because we have current living gurus that are part of this kind of disciplic succession. And I think now, I don't know how many, if I should keep mentioning names, but certainly now, I mean, it's been 44 years since Prabhupada left physically, in the physical sense. And I think we're now in the kind of, some instances, the fourth generation of Guru's disciples since Prabhupada left. What I wanted to do also was just to give some examples, some historical examples, some current examples. Not that I want to dilute Hare Krsna London or to give people the impression that Hare Krsna London's the only Sangha that follows the Ritvic order. There are examples in other mats where the Ritvic order is followed. And I'm going to give some examples now. So the first one I want to go back to, any Gaudiya Vaishnava historians, I want to go back to 1937. Any of you that have read my book will know about this. So there is an organization called the Gaudiya Mission UK, which is the oldest Hare Krishna group in the UK. It was founded in 1933 in London. They have a temple in Willesden. And the house that the mat is based in was owned by a lady called Daisy Boatwell. So Daisy Boatwell was given the name Vinod Vani Devi Dasi in 1937. Now, the official position of the Gaudiya Mission UK is that Daisy Boatwell, Vinod Vani Devi Dasi, was a disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur. However, when you look at the dates of certain things, you realize that might not be in the way that people in ISKCON, for example, think it to be. So, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Prabhupada left the planet in January 1937. And in April 1937, Daisy Botel was still not Vinodvani Devi Dasi. She still hadn't received her initiation. However, she is recognized by the Gaudiya mission as a disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So this is an example now of what we could refer to as a Ripvic initiation. So, and this is also backed up by one of the ISKCON gurus, Bhaktiprakash Swami, in his book, Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhava, where he talks a bit about this. And I've come off the fence very rarely in my life. I've come off the fence. I've done it quite too often on the fence sometimes. So where he suggests, and I have come off the fence after doing my own research, that she was not, in the way that people in ISKCON understand it, she was not a disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in the sense that she was not, she never met him, by the way. Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj never came to Britain, and Daisy Botel never went to India. And we believe the Ripvic ceremony was carried out by, I'm suggesting was carried out by Bhakti Saranga Goswami Maharaj. Bhakti Saranga Goswami Maharaj was the fifth disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj that came to the UK. A lot of people think there was only three in the 1930s. There was actually five. So that's one example of a Ripvic ceremony that happened in London in 1937. The next one, fast forward, my maths are terrible, to 1992. So this is in ISKCON. So back in 1992, Hridayananda Das Goswami was due to travel to the Republic of Ireland to carry out some initiations. From what I understand from talking to people, he was unable to fly because there was some air problems, there was some smog, or, when all flights are landed because they can't fly. So he asked a godbrother of his, Tribhuvannath Prabhu, who was a really well-known disciple of Prabhupada, to carry out the initiations on his behalf. And that happened in the Republic of Ireland in 1992. And fast forward to two more recent examples, there's probably others. The Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat, which has two temples in London. It was founded by Srila Sridhar Maharaj in 1941. Their most recent Acharya, Bhakti Nimal Acharya Maharaj, recently passed away. And at that time, there were disciples that were aspiring for him. But because he had physically passed away, what happened around 4 weeks later is a godbrother of his carried out this initiations on his behalf. And they are referred to as Ripvic Initiations. So I know one young woman in London, she said her disciple is Bhakti Nimal Acharya Maharaj. And I said, oh, how can that be? Because I'm sure you were initiated after he passed away. He said, oh, so-and-so acted as the Ripvic. And this only happened about 8 to 10 weeks ago. So that's a very recent example. And also, just so they feel included, and I don't know all the details, the International Pure Bhakti Yoga Society, founded by Narayana Maharaj in 2004. I don't know all the details because I met so many devotees when I read my book, and this information never went in. But there is a disciple of Narayana Maharaj's who is currently carrying out Ripvic initiations in India on behalf of Narayana Maharaj, which is against, if you like, against a strong word, against the official line of the International Pure Bhakti Yoga Society.
Yeah, I'm dumbfounded that those last ones you mentioned. The first one I think you'd mentioned to me
when we met,
not fully, Daisy,
Hotel,
when we met before, but why are they so strongly against this Ripvic order if they're doing it themselves?
From when sometimes it's kind of who do you ask questions and how do you ask it, because people get a bit funny, don't they? It seems to be a real issue in ISKCON, I think, because of the history. certainly in the other mats I've mentioned, it wasn't such of a concern. It was like, that's just what happens. I think because there's been a lot of history between ISKCON and followers of the Ripvic philosophy that has understandably upset people, caused concern. But I haven't, certainly in the third mat I mentioned, the Sri Chaitanya Saraswati mat, there wasn't such an issue about it. I don't want anyone listening to think that I'm causing a heresy now, but
yeah, exactly.
I think the point I'm trying to put across to all our viewers and listeners is that what Radhika is following is more widespread or more commonly practiced than one thinks. And this black and white attitude of them and us isn't helpful. Yes, all of us will have our own personal views, and Radhika might say, well, there's no room for personal views, just read the letter.
You know it.
But it isn't so black and white, I think, in the Hare Krishna family. What Radhika is following is more commonplace than we think.
Yeah. Well, I for one, I'm glad you told me that, because it'll be certainly an astra to use when I speak to any ISKCON members who are so against it. And I think it is what you mentioned. The thing is, I try not to veer too much away from ISKCON, because that is Prabhupada's mission. It's his legacy. Not I'm not from another mat. I'm not trying to cross over into what they're doing, because that's another issue. That's a whole nother story. But we closely linked with ISKCON in terms of everything that Prabhupada has left is still what we do as Ritvics. So our infighting, I would call it, is a debate between ISKCON and Ritvics. So if anyone must be convinced, it's any members that ISKCON any members of ISKCON, not any other mat is another discussion. But that's super good to know that anyone who is from ISKCON and is kind of swinging between other Gaudiya mats, that it is is not unheard of to have a Ripvic. And this, because a lot of people do say to me, well, it's not anywhere else. You're the only ones who do this. They're like, it's not in Shastra, it's never been done before, no other Goswami has done this, blah 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 blah. So
I'm just trying to think now. I mean, those are certain examples that I'm aware of, I'm just thinking about the Nityananda line, which is outside of the Sarasvat line, which we are all in. So the Sarasvat line is effectively all the offshoots of the Gaudiya mat from 1937 or 8. I'm just trying to think of the Nityananda line, and I'm not completely sure. The Nityananda line isn't as organized as the Sarasvat line. I hope anyone listening is not offended by that. A good joke, the Hare Krishnas are not an organized religion. There's lots of Hare Krishna jokes that are, not all clean either. I'm just trying to think in the Nityananda line, is there any kind of, no, not that I can think of. But I mean, also I think it kind of institutionally, the Ritvic philosophy isn't contained in one particular sangha or mat. Those of you that have read the Hare Krishnas in Britain will know there's a number of groups in the UK that follow the Ritvic philosophy. And the thing I just want to point out from an objective point of view is that what Radhika has created, so the philosophy has been around for a while, quite a few decades, but the sangha that Radhika has set up is new. Yeah. So I think the point I'm trying to get at is that some of the listeners and the viewers might think, well, there's all these problems with the Ritvics in the 80s and the 90s and the noughties. That's the decade after the 90s. But actually, that's actually with those issues were largely with a different organization. I'm not going to name them simply because I did try to get in contact with them to talk to them, but they didn't want to engage with me. When I was researching for my book. So a lot of those issues, just an objective point of view that ISKCON has had historically with the followers of the Ritvic philosophy has been a different sangha.
Yes.
And your priority, from what I understand, is to encourage people to read Srila Prabhupada's books and to chant Hare Krishna and to live a devotional life.
Exactly. Yeah, it's to be a bhakti yoga practitioner. Everyone wants Prabhupada. That's what Prabhupada wants. He just wants us to be pure devotees who have dedicated their lives to propagating Krishna consciousness. That means practicing it as well, not just talking about it. And can I just clarify that I thank you for calling me the founder, but I'm not.
Okay.
It was a joint effort between myself, my brother and dad, and
co-founder.
I set up a co-founder. Yeah, exactly. I did set up the Facebook page, and I like to post on there, but we kind of like and also people kind of accused us of being family orientated, and it's only a family thing, and it isn't. This is open for everyone. Anyone who's in London is a Hare Krsna London and follows this Ripvic order. That's all. So sorry.
And so just tell us again a bit about Hare Krsna London. So you meet regularly, you have programs. Tell us a bit about some of the regular things that you do.
Yeah, I mean, COVID happened, and that's really kind of put a big old dampener on stuff. And we're not a big organization. We're not like we're not here to rival ISKCON. Actually, all we wanted to do was continue what we were doing in ISKCON, but do it properly. And that means to follow Prabhupada as our Diksha Guru. But we can't do that there. So we set up this other organization, let's say, or Sangha. It's simply a Sangha where we can meet, and we meet on a Saturday, which is we hold a love feast, but at the moment it's paused, and we do Sankirtan. So you can find the Facebook page Hare Krsna London on Facebook, and there's sorry, can I do a plug?
You can, of course you can. I was actually going to put a link in above the broadcast anyway, so
yeah. Jay. And we also have a page Hare Krsna London for Shardarians, where we're posting everything we cook. Everything is posted with quotes, so we can understand what Prabhupada is saying and how we should offer. We're also collaborating. So it's early days for us. We're not a big 5,000, 10,000 organization, and we're just a few. So it may sound like, well, they're not doing anything, and it may look like that, but actually Prabhupada is saying to us, well, if you follow the 4 regs, chant 16 rounds, and you make friendships with devotees, and you associate and read my books, first of all, and I spent so much time writing them for you, then you're practically there, making progress. So I don't like it when people sort of come at us like, well, we need another ISKCON, otherwise I'm not leading ISKCON. Well, spiritual life isn't that. We may need a religious organization to formalize our spiritual practices, but we're not dependent on that. And that's what Hare Krsna London is. It's a place where anyone in London wants to come and say, well, well, I have this question, can we discuss it? Or drop us a message on Facebook. And spiritual practice is not about formalization of things, although it is part of it. It's not the be all and end all. Actually, spiritual life is about following the orders of the spiritual master first and foremost, and that's to chant 16 rounds, follow 4 regs, offer everything to Krishna. We have deities. So my brother and his wife are doing the deity worship, and everything we make and cook is offered, and we try and encourage everyone around us. We're trying to expand the Sangha by whatever means possible. That's Sankirtan included, book distribution, any online means. I try and comment a lot here and there wherever I can to encourage. And Prabhupada also says, anyone you meet, just mention Krishna, talk about Krishna. And for me, that means trying to implement potentially varnashram systems, or social systems, or anything like that. Anything that I can find relatable, I would try and insert that into a conversation with whomever. So that is also Hare Krishna London. You know, we're doing
and I saw you and the other members of the Sangha at the London Rath Yatra.
Yeah.
I think it's great how the London Rath Yatra always brings different devotees together. And I think I counted actually. So you've got, obviously it's organized by ISKCON, and I'm guessing that they must pay the London Assembly, the council or whatever it's called in London, money to hire it. And then you go to the kind of outer fringes. That's not a pun. And you go to the outer lines of the square, and then I found at least 3 other mats distributing books and setting up tables. And I personally love it. Personally, yeah, and you were distributing leaflets. I saw that, and I took a leaflet. They're over here. They're over there, by the way. I'm a big fan of taking leaflets, not all the time. Like I always take leaflets from the Jehovah's Witnesses as well, and I do read them. I'm not saying you're the same as the Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm just saying I always take a leaflet and I always read them at some point. And I gave you your own copy of my book. I gave you your own free copy to thank you for taking part in the research. Because to me inclusion is really important. I hate exclusion. I'm not going to talk too much about my own experiences. I've been excluded from certain things in my life and over the years, and it makes me I just hate exclusion. And I've done a lot of campaigning for inclusion and equal rights in with different hats on. So I might possibly disagree with you on some issues, but you're still entitled to your own view. But you'd say it's not your view. You would say it's not your view. It's just the actual reading of the 1977 letter.
Someone is right. At the end of the day, I always think, someone there is only one absolute truth, and that's Krishna. And anyone who is, is understanding the philosophy correctly will understand the Ripvic order.
I sometimes think as I get older that under Krishna, I think I'll just accept postmodernism, which is accepting multiple truths. It's a lot easier. You don't have to argue with anybody. Krishna is the absolute.
Everyone is right.
It's kind of Krishna postmodernism. I've just made that up. Maybe that'll be a new mat. Krishna postmodernism.
Yeah, exactly.
So believe it or not, we've been chatting for well over an hour, just over an hour. In a minute, when I should have said this before we started broadcasting, Radhika. When I say goodbye to everyone that's watching now, I'm not saying goodbye to you. So we can have a little we can have a debrief after and chat about the viewers and what they think about you and me. But Radhika, it's been great to have Radhika on the show this week as our special guest from Hare Krsna London. And she's guest number 22, and she is, as far as I'm concerned, a part of the global and national Hare Krishna family. She's chanting Hare Krishna and following Srila Prabupada. And I will put a link to Hare Krishna London on the broadcast above this or below. I get confused if it's above or below. So thank you everyone for tuning in this week to the Hare Krishnas in Britain podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, then please do watch it lots of times and like it and put a wonderful comment. If you're watching this on Facebook, please do the same. Please like, love it, or care for it. There's 4 different emotions, and I think only one's negative, which is angry. I think the other 3 are like, love, and care. So do one of those things. And also, if you disagree with some of the things that Radhika has suggested or said, you are allowed to do that. And, you can get in touch with her and ask those questions. Don't ask me. And that's important that we can have those adult conversations as well. And also, if anyone wants just a kind of bite-size very small bite-sized look at the Ripvic order in the UK, please do purchase a copy of the Hare Krishnas in Britain, which is on Amazon, in Kindle and on paperback, where you can, there are a number of pages dedicated to the Ripvic order, and there is a wonderful brief mention with a big B, brief mention of Hare Krsna London, where you can find out more about the Ripvic order. And that's it. We're going to say goodbye to our viewers at home. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.